pull this guy up. Here we go. So I'm pulling up, channeling. Make it a little bit bigger screen also. Let's see if I can make it accessible here, make it readable, easily readable. Okay, so this is my second in a series of my un-Maimonidean scholars, either before, during the time, or after, who are not excited with Aristotelian approaches. They're looking for something that is maybe emotionally, spiritually more touching. So this is Judah HaLevi. He doesn't have the formal title of rabbi. I was curious about that. I looked, and he was a major scholar. He was a scholar of one of the major Talmudic geniuses of his day, but never went for formal smicha, it would seem, but combined rabbinic studies and philosophy. So here is a statue in his honor in Caesarea. There's several statues in this plaza in Caesarea, Caesarea, 1075 to 11. You'll see on here. I have a better 1141. So here is Judah HaLevi. I call him poet, an anti-philosophical philosopher. He uses philosophy, but try to break from philosophy per se, to go to something deeper. And so he is the premier Hebrew poet of his generation in medieval Spain. He is from the city of Toledo, which is actually a Christian Spanish city. The Reconquista had started, and so large parts of Spain were already in Christian hands. He left Toledo, made his way to Cordoba. In Cordoba, he had a very bad experience under Muslim rulers. They were under a period of extremism, Almohades, during that period. And so he left Cordoba. He wandered around, like a lot of great Jewish scholars of that period. We're in the process, very productive, wrote 800 poems of secular and Jewish and religious themes. And he was looking to balance religion, make a reasonable defense of religion, Judaism in particular. So his education, Hebrew, Arabic, Bible, rabbinic literature, grammar, poetry, philosophy, theology, and medicine, right? Very similar to the Rambam, who lived just a half century later. He was a trained physician, and he was also well-versed in the study of Talmud and philosophy. And he knew Aristotle. He was, like all the people of his day, studying Aristotle. But unlike the Rambam, who decided to adopt the methods of Aristotelian reasoning wholeheartedly, HaLevi made a 180-degree turn against it. Not that he turned against reason itself, but against the primacy of only rational thought. Let me see what he gets to. So in his last years, he was fixated on the love of the land of Israel. He finally made his way to the land of Israel. It was a very dangerous journey in those days. He got there, and the legend says he died at the gates of Jerusalem. And following up on the legend, it also says that as he came to the city, he was overpowered by the sight of the holy city. And he sang his most beautiful elegy. It is Sion Halo Tishali. Very often we associate it with Tisha B'Av. Zion, will you not ask of the well-being of those your prisoners? And it is said in this legend that at that moment he was ridden down and killed by an Arab horseman who dashed forth from a gate. Now nobody really knows if there's anything behind it, because the legend's written down several centuries after his time, but it's a sort of a fitting metaphor for this poem, and gave his life, to be in the land of Israel, this figure. So samples of poems and musical versions, right, as a poet. Let's look at some beautiful music in his, that has been, let's say, inspired by his poetry. So this one, Yerushalayim, Yefei Nof Mesos Tevel. That's entitled Jerusalem. Yefei Nof, the beautiful vision. Mesos Tevel, the joy of the world. Kiryat LeMelech Rav, the capital of the great king. My soul desires towards you. You can see the English. Pity and tenderness burst in me, as I remember former glories, temple now in broken stones. I wish I could fly to thee on the wings of an eagle, and mingle my tears with thy dust. I've sought thee, love, though the king is not there. And instead of Gilad's balm, snakes and scorpions, right? I find snakes and scorpions instead of the healing power of the balm of Gilad. Let me fall on their broken stones and tenderly kiss them, and the taste of thy dust will be sweeter than honey to me. Okay. So here is Eddie Ankari, an Israeli singer who was not originally very religious, but she became more religious, very much inspired by the religious themes of our liturgy and the literature. And she's describing driving up to Jerusalem, approaching Jerusalem, and she's overwhelmed by the beauty and the grandeur. And then she understands what Judah HaLevi was feeling. But let me just move ahead past her introduction. קריה למלך לך נחשפה נפשי מפאתי מרה כבודך אשר גלה ולבך אשר חרב ומי תנני על כנפי נשרים וגם הקרב הלא את אבנייך החונן ושקם וטעם רגבייך לפי מדבש ירח
לך נחשפה נפשי מפאתי
And then this one, this is very well known piece, Libi B'Mizrach. This is the feeling of isolation that Jews felt through the 1800 years of exile. Wherever a Jew was, he was never at home, never in his place. As much as he might come to the heights of power and prosperity, he was always the alien. And so he gives expression to this. Libi b'mizrach v'anochi b'sof ma'arav. My heart is in the east, Jerusalem, and I sit at the farthest end of the west. When you go to Spain, you couldn't get much farther before falling off the edge of the world, right? How can I taste that which I'm eating, and how can I enjoy it? How shall I pay my offerings and my vows? When the land of Zion is in the chains of Edom. Edom, who rules the land of Israel at this time? Is the Crusades. It's under the Christians. Edom, not under the Muslims, but under the Christians at that time. Bani bekavel Arav, and I am chained under the Arabs. Zion under the Christians, I under the Arabs. Yekal be'enai azov kol tuf Sfarad. I would willingly abandon all the good of Spain. Kemo yekal be'enai re'ot afarot vir nechrav. As it would be just to see the dust of your ruins of the ancient temple, right? So that is this feeling of longing. I understand this. Jews made their way. They tried to make their way. They couldn't really come in big waves, but Jews in every generation made their way to the land of Israel. At some point, tried. My father's grandfather came to the land of Israel. He was 80-something, and he decided it was time to go to the land of Israel. And like the legend of HaLevi, he was murdered there by the locals. Right? Yeah. And that was the hard part of being in that land. Not European invaders colonizing, but as an alienated people longing to go back and be somewhere that is home. So this is a version, USC Baroque Sinfonia, directed by Adam Knight Gilbert, and there's a theme of Eastern and Western influences in the music in this version. And this one, a plea for the end of exile, as I say, is very often associated with Tisha B'Av. Tzion halot tishali l'shlom asirayich. O Zion, will you not ask for the well-being of your captives? Do you wonder how and where your captives are now? And if they think of you, the far-flocked remnants from north and south, east and west, in all directions, near and far, they send their greetings. As I send mine, captured by my longings, to weep like herons do upon your mountains. Mourning your loneliness, I am the wail of jackals. Dreaming your son's return, the song of lute strings. Now, that very last line, the song of lute strings, I'm just going to go over here to the Hebrew. You see, Tzion halot tishali, the very last line. Shivat shvutech ani kinor l'shirayach. Anybody recognize that refrain? Ani kinor shirayach. What is the song?
Jerusalem.
With, huh? Which one?
Lion of gold.
Jerusalem of gold. Right? She said the long pardon my off key, but that's it. She's picking up that refrain that Naomi Shemer is very much aware of Jewish precedent, the language, the Hebrew language of poets and of the Midrash, and she incorporates it all the time. So here is Tzion halot tishali by Ophira Gluska. This was part of the Israel Song Festival 1972.
ציון הלא תשאלי לשלום אסירייך דור ששלומך והם יתר עדרייך מים ומזרח ומצפון ותימן שלום רחוק וקרוב שיא מכל עברייך ושלום אסיר תבן נותן דמעיו כטל חרמון ונכסף לרידתה על הררייך לבכות ענותך אני ואת אחלום שיבות שבותך אני כינור לשירייך אני כינור לשירייך ציון הלא תשאלי לשלום אסירייך דור ששלומך והם יתר עדרייך אשרי מחכה ויגיע ויראה על אותו רך ויבכאו עליו שחרייך לראות בטובת בחירייך ולעלוז בשמחתך בשובך עלי קדמת נעורייך לבכות ענותך אני תענית ואת אחלום שיבות שבותך אני כינור לשירייך אני כינור לשירייך אשרי מחכה ויגיע ויראה עלות אורך ויבכרו עליו שחרייך לראות בטובת בחירייך ולעלוז בשמחתך בשובך עלי קדמת נעורייך לבכות אמותך אני תענים ועת אחלום שיבות שבותך אני כינור לשירייך אני כינור לשירייך ציון הלא נשאלי לשלום
Okay. Composition does justice, I think, in the style, the heaviness of the longing. Well, it's not all heavy. Those of you who came on at the beginning, he has religious poems, this one for the love of Shabbat. And I'm not going to play it again, but if you go back to the Facebook or the YouTube recording, you'll see right at the very beginning. And it's the melody, Shuli Natan, the same one who sang Jerusalem of Gold, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, the same song in the original 1967 song festival before the Six-Day War, which uses that refrain of Ani Kinor. So anyway, this one beautiful. I will drink to you, O Shabbat, from my cup, and every day of the week is telling its story in preparation of Shabbat. Till I come to Shabbat, how I delight at the sunset to see the face of Shabbat, a refreshed face. Come with apples, multiply fruits, that my rest, my beloved, and my friend. Right? Those words used from Song of Songs, taking a love poem and now applying it to Shabbat. Zedo divrei. Pick it up on your own when you want. Beautiful, nice, lively melody on this one. Now, not all heavy, and religious. He's a poet. He's a poet. Poets write romantic love poetry. So this one, and the translation from Hillel Halkin, and Hillel Halkin is trying to create something that keeps the style of the poem, and so it's not a literal translation. So you can see here over this fallen shoulders. I'm going to try to give a literal translation. Likrat halal ishkech krav echziki. Over the dead soldier who has died for your desires. Right? Echziki, hold them. Right? Ube'esh nedod ahava. Adliki, burn him in the fire, even more so as you pull away from him. Ma'asbi, you've pushed me away. You feel me disgusting. Arkain tarikinli harbi hanit. Thrust your spear in me. Right? Vani benafshi em asa, and I'm disgusted of my own self. Hariki, go ahead and kill me with the spear. Really lovesick guy. Rayat Tzvi, the beloved of my gazelle. Lo tov heyododech shabi. It's not good that your lover is in captivity. Kirviv rechvei hanedod harchiki. Come closer and with your chariot, come closer and chase away my wanderings. Eres devai hafkila eres tanug. Turn my bed of tears into a bed of joy and bliss, right? That he can speak. But then because of the rhyming, the way he does it, he has to miss the last refrain is dvash v'chalav ohavech haniki. Milk and honey, let me nurse of your milk and honey, right? Like an infant at the breast, right? Okay, very warm, very physical poetry also, right? It's not all heavy. Well, love is very heavy. I guess that's what he's saying. Very heavy. It's like a wounded soldier in love. All right, so now here's his great work, his masterpiece. This is the one that we really remember about, which is the story of the Khazars. The book is called Sefer HaKuzari. It has a longer name in his original. I'll go to that. But who are these people, the Khazars? He's written a book, massive book called The Khazars. And so these are mysterious people, a semi-nomadic people, Turkish people, were part of a confederation of Turkish-speaking tribes. They pop up in history in the late 6th century, before the rise of Islam, and they established a major commercial empire covering the southeastern section of what is today Russia, Ukraine, Crimea, and Kazakhstan. It's the major artery of commerce between Eastern Europe and Southwestern Asia, one of the foremost trading empires of the medieval world, commanding the western marches of the Silk Road, played a crossroads, commercial road is a crossroads between China, Middle East, and the Kievan Rus. The original Russian Empire is in Kiev, Ukraine. That's why the Russians didn't give up on the Ukraine so easily, because that's their heartland. Now, 3 centuries, some 3 centuries, from 650 to 965, the Khazars dominated the area from the Volga Don to the eastern Crimea to the Caucasus. I'll show you in a map. Eventually, they were defeated by the Kievan Russians to the north and faded away. So now, very interesting that they're on the Silk Road. Now, the Silk Road was very heavily dominated during that time by Jewish merchants, because it was Jewish merchants who could travel across the Muslim realms easily and make their way into Christian Europe to sell their merchandise from the east and bring merchandise from the west to the east. That trade route. We know, by the way, now that some Jews carry Chinese DNA in them. And it's because they were going there, picking up brides, coming back with their children on the route. And so that route, right, goes right through that area that is Khazaria. So at some point, the royalty adopted Judaism, perhaps a way of keeping themselves out of the reach of both Muslims from the south and the Christians in Byzantium to the west. And again, you'll see on the map why that is critical. So where is it controversial for us is that there's a great thinker of the 20th century, Arthur Koestler, whose claim to fame really is that he helped bring down in the West their admiration for the idea of communism, because he reported on the Stalinist show trials, and he created in his writings what it was like to be in the fake trials under Stalin. But it was a little bit of a kook. And after the Holocaust, he decided the Jews should just disappear. And if they could prove Jews are not really Jews, then they would just disappear. So he claimed the Jews are really the 13th tribe, and that they're really Khazars, Turks, and therefore they're not Jews, there should be no anti-Semitism. Now, there's some theories that maybe the DNA of Jews is DNA of somewhere out of Turkey, but that would not have been the Khazar region, even that. They do not find any DNA of the Jews of Crimea, the Krimchak Jews, that might indicate something from Khazars. Rather, DNA evidence shows quite to the contrary. There might be some traces, but it's not anything dominant. Well, just for our mapping purposes, here they are. Why would they have become Jews? Well, as I said, here is the trade route, the route, Silk Road. You want to come in here into the Arabian lands. You want to come here into the European lands. You command this area. Right in the center, you can see the map. I'll enlarge it for a second for us. You can see the map here. I'll enlarge this anyway, make it easier to read. All right, so right in here in the middle is the heartland of the Khazars. It is, if you notice, in this part here is the Volga River. Stalingrad would have been here. So I realized suddenly that as I'm looking at this, my father was right in the heartland of the Khazars during World War II, because he was right there as he made his way towards the east. Caucasus, Georgia's down below. They conquered that area. As you go up here, this is Ukraine and Crimea, right? And here's Kiev. That all came under their territory. As I said, they lasted for about 3 centuries, and then they vanished. So they picked Judaism because it kept these Byzantine Christians off their back, and it kept these Iraqi, the Baghdad Caliphate of the Abbasids off their back. They said, we're not part of you. Right? They didn't have to fight their wars against them. That's one of the theories. So to make it a little more vivid, here is one of our lancemen. This is a typical Khazar horseman. To me, he looks like Putin, but this I know, this is a Mongol type headdress on the horse. That's a Mongol type hat, if you think of pictures of the Mongols. Also, the Turks and Mongols, the peoples of the steppes of Central Asia, they all have this in common, the horseback riding, the warriors on horseback, very powerful, right? They're part of those people. Some eventually become the Turkish Empire as it comes to be. So there is one of our landsmen. So what's the story? Okay, I have asked Jeff to help me with this. It's a philosophical defense of Judaism against philosophy. So he creates this story. By the time he's writing it, the Khazars have actually disappeared. He's going back to some documents that have reached him about this mystical kingdom of Jews. Why would they become Jews? That's what he's trying to create, this supposed disputation. And so the king of the Khazars inquires of a philosopher concerning his religious persuasion, because he has a dream. And he has a dream that God says, your intentions are right, but your actions are not in place. You have to have the right actions. So the philosopher answers the king, there is no favor or dislike in the nature of God, because he's above desire and intention. A desire intimates a want in the person who feels it, and not until satisfied he becomes complete. If it remains unfulfilled, he lacks completion. Similarly, is God, in the opinion of philosophers, above the knowledge of individuals, because the latter changes in time, there can be no change in God's knowledge. He therefore does not know thee, much less thy thoughts and actions, nor does he listen to thy prayers or see thy movements. If philosophers say he created thee, they only use a metaphor, because he is the cause of causes and creation of all things, not because this was his intention from the beginning. He never created man. Everything was produced out of a prime cause. That's the position of the philosopher. So, Jeff, you're the Khazari, the Khuzari. Would you answer back?
Your words are convincing, yet they do not correspond to what I wish to find. I know already that my soul is pure and that my actions are calculated to gain the favor of God. One might expect the gift of prophecy, quite common among philosophers, considering their deeds, their knowledge. This proves that the divine influence, as well as the souls, have a secret which is not identical with what you say, O philosopher.
Right. He's frustrated with the philosopher because it doesn't give him any meat for his heart. So then continue with the Khuzari. What does he say?
I will ask the Christians and the Muslims, since one of these persuasions is, no doubt, the God-pleasing one. As regards the Jews, I am satisfied that they are low station, few in number, and generally despised.
Right. In fact, HaLevi calls this book a defense of a despised people. Right? He's going to turn the table. So the Christian scholar, one of the problems we have is the English translation is from the Hebrew translation of the original Arabic. So some of the words in the Hebrew are very clumsy also. It turns out my wife's uncle, after translating also Sa'adya Gaon and also the Rambam, also translated the Khuzari into correct Hebrew from the original Arabic, the correct manuscript. Okay, so here we go. So, Chacham Chachmei Edom, that's the way the Hebrew text says, one of the wise men of Edom, Edom meaning the Christian realms. I believe that all things are created whilst the Creator is eternal, that he created the whole world in 6 days, that all mankind sprang from Adam and after him from Noah. And he goes on and recounts basically the story of the Bible. I believe in all that is written in the Torah and the records of the children of Israel, does not deny that. That's where he gets his proof. Then goes on to the birth of the Son of God, and he's the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And our laws or regulations arrive from the Apostle Simon and from ordinations taken from the Torah, which we study. Its truth is indisputable. It came from God. So, says the Khazari to him.
Then, yes. Then the Khazari said, I see here no logical conclusion. Nay, logic rejects most of what thou sayest, which they would not believe if they only heard of them without seeing them. My duty is to investigate further.
Right. This idea that his father, the three things are one thing is three things. He just can't buy the story of Christians. So he goes to the doctor of Islam, Chacham Mechachmei Ishmael. Again, the word Ishmael, the children of Ishmael, referring to the Muslims. And he says, we acknowledge the unity and eternity of God and that all men are derived from Adam and Noah. And goes again and recounts the history of the children of Israel as in the Torah. And our prophet is just the seal of the prophets who abrogated the previous laws and invited all nations to embrace Islam. In other words, we are the outcome of that Torah, but we are the peak, the epitome of that Torah. So go ahead.
Okay. If anyone is to be guided in matters divine and to be convinced that God speaks to man whilst he considers it improbable, he must be convinced of it by means of generally known facts, which allow no refutation, and particularly imbue him with the belief that God has spoken to man. Although your book may be a miracle, as long as it is written in Arabic, a non-Arab, as I am, cannot perceive its miraculous character. And even if it were read to me, I could not distinguish between it and any other book written in the Arabic language.
Right. In other words, well, just because you got this fellow Muhammad, he has this vision. How do I know? And you've got this book in Arabic. I can't tell from just from that book anything about it. So now the doctor answers, is not our book full of the stories of Moses and the children of Israel? No one can deny what he did to Pharaoh, how he divided the sea, saved those who enjoyed his favor, but drowned those who aroused his wrath. After this, what happened previously, the flood, the destruction of people Lot, is this not so? Well, no suspicion of deceit and imagination is impossible. Well, no, our story in the Quran is based on what's in the children of Israel. Well, what's his response?
Indeed, I see myself compelled to ask the Jews because they are the relic of the children of Israel, for I see that they constitute in themselves the evidence for the divine law on earth.
All right, so it says, here are the Christians, here are the Muslims, but they're all basing themselves on the Jews. Well, let's find out what do the Jews have to say. In comes the rabbi, Chacham Mechachmei HaYudim, wise man, also referred to as Chaver, the author. I believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, who led the children of Israel out of Egypt with signs and miracles, who fed them in the desert, gave them the land, after giving them, made them traverse the sea and the Jordan in a miraculous way, sent Moses with his laws, recites, that's our story. Our belief is comprised in the Torah, a very large domain. Boom. I only believe in God because that's my story. So Al-Khazari comes back and says,
I had not intended to ask any Jew because I am aware of their reduced condition and narrow-minded views, as their misery left them nothing commendable. Now shouldest thou, O Jew, not have said that thou believest in the Creator of the world, its governor and guide, and in him who created and keeps thee, and such attributes which serve as evidence for every believer, and for the sake of which he pursues justice in order to resemble the Creator in his wisdom and justice.
right, what are you telling me the story? Give me the basis, the philosophical basis. So the rabbi answers him, that which thou dost express is religion based on speculation and system, the research of thought, but open to many doubts. It's called Hadat Hakashit. As he calls the religion of Hakashit is syllogism. Hagit and system speculation. Right? And this is basically the foundation of the Aristotelian system or the Socratic system, pure speculation out of thought only. So now, look here. He says, I talked about Abraham and Isaac. Well, what did Moses tell Pharaoh? He said, the God of the Hebrews sent me to thee, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He tells Pharaoh. Pharaoh understands who's talking to him in the Bible. Abraham was well known to the nations. Most of the divine spirit was in contact with the patriarchs, cared for them, performed miracles for them. He did not say the God of heaven and earth, nor my creator and thine sent me. The same way God commenced his speech to the assembled people of Israel. I am the God whom you worship, who led you out of the land of Egypt. He did not say, I'm the creator of the world and you're creator. No, it's personal. It's all personal. It's what we can experience. The same style I speak to thee, Prince of the Khazars, when thou didst ask me about my creed. And then he goes in and explains the history of humanity from Adam and shows a tradition going down from the first human being through the children of Shem, through to the children of Abraham, right? A long chain of tradition of the origins of the world and of history. And note, of course, that both the Christians and the Muslims accept that. So Al-Khazari answers, go ahead.
It is strange that you should possess authentic chronology of the creation of the world. An arrangement of this kind removes any suspicion of untruth or common plot. Not 10 people could discuss such a thing without disagreeing and disclosing their secret understanding, nor could they refute anyone who tried to establish the truth of a matter like this.
Right. In other words, that the history of the Jews is the history of humanity, and they have it, and it is fairly compact and concrete, and nobody disagrees. The Christians don't disagree, the Muslims don't disagree. There must be a foundation in this experience. Go ahead. Oh, I see. Is it likely that anyone could today invent false statements concerning the origin, history, and language of well-known nations? He goes into it. He describes how, for example, language comes from one source, and then very clear as the languages break up, they point back to an origin with common ancestor. And he talks about Hebrew coming out of Ever. And it gives an example, Hebrew, for example, and Arabic and Aramaic, all being similar, pointing back to common roots, common heritage. So go ahead, Khazari answers.
Okay, such a thing would only have been possible if they had all come to an agreement. This, however, is improbable, unless all men are the descendants of Adam, of Noah, or of some other ancestor from whom they received the hebdommadal
calculation. Hebdommadal means a 7-day week. In other words, he's surprised. It's interesting because the nations of the world do agree on calendaring based on 7-day cycles. Well, that must go back to an origin of humanity. And so the rabbi says, and that's what I meant. East and West agree on the decimal system. All humanity uses a system of tens. What instinct induced them to keep the number 10 unless it was a tradition handed down by the first one who did so? We know there are other number systems. There's a 12 system, there's a 6 system, right? But it's a 10 that is the main one. Well, it's because we got 10 fingers on our hands. That might be why. Unless but we were barefoot, we should have had a 20 system. Go ahead. Now the rabbi says on the antiquity of the universe, right? The philosophers say the universe has no beginning, right? There's an excuse for the philosophers, being Grecians. Science and religion did not come to them as inheritance, right? He looks at the Greeks and says they're very great thinkers, but they're starting from zero. And if you look at Greek history, they feel themselves as starting from zero. They had no sense of history. They didn't. It was boom, and they were there. I mean, they had the legends of Homer and so on, but there's no where did it come from? There's no sense of it having, in the Greek perspective, it's all cycles, also repetition. History just keeps repeating itself. So Khazari.
Does this mean that Aristotle's philosophy is not deserving of credence?
So he says, well, certainly, we give him credit. He exerted his mind because he had no tradition from any reliable source at his disposal. He's struggling. He has to think on nothing. He meditated on the beginning and end of the world, found as much difficulty in the theory of a beginning as that of an eternity. In other words, Aristotle also has a problem, philosophically, with the idea of no beginning, no end, eternity. He doesn't have any foundation. He's struggling from ground zero in his mind. Go ahead.
Is there any proof? Is there any evidence of proof?
Right. So the question of eternity and creation is obscure, while the arguments are evenly balanced. Okay, the world started from nothing, or the world has been in existence forever. The arguments are fine arguments on both sides. You can't come to a decision. The theory of creation gets greater weight from the prophetic tradition of Adam, Noah, and Moses. In other words, if on the basis of logic alone we can't decide between the eternity of the universe and the creation of the universe, then we have a tradition going back to Adam. Certainly that is more valuable than just speculation, which leaves us 50-50. We have a definite as opposed to a maybe. Khazari, go ahead.
Let us now return to our subject and explain to me how your belief grew, how it spread and became general.
Okay, so now he says, a religion of divine origin arises suddenly. It is bidden to arise, and there it is, like the creation of the world. In other words, unlike philosophical systems that built up step, 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 all of a sudden you have an outburst of religion. That's why it's divine. And so Khazar says,
Thou surprisest me, O Rabbi.
okay, so it is indeed astonishing. He goes ahead. The Israelites lived in Egypt as slaves, 600,000 men above the age of 20, descendants of the 12 tribes. Notwithstanding their lowly position, compared to the tyrant and his might, God sends Moses and Aaron before Pharaoh's signs and miracles, likely to change the course of nature. The Israelites left the country of Pharaoh's bondage by the command of God the same night at the same moment when the firstborn died, and reached the shores of the Red Sea. And it goes on with the miracles of the Exodus. Pharaoh and his hosts were drowned, and the waves washed them away. So the Israelites could see them with their own eyes, a long and well-known story. In other words, it is something everybody sees. They all together see this wonder. Go ahead then, Khazari.
This is, in truth, divine power, and the commandments connected with it must be accepted. No one could imagine for a moment that this was the result of necromancy, calculation, or fantasy. This is also irrefutable, a thing which occurred to 600,000 people for 40 years.
Right, 600,000 people, plus all the families and the kids, can't all be mistaken. This is where his foundation is. The public proof is Christianity is a private revelation to a few of Jesus coming back from the dead. A few people. Nobody, the public doesn't see it. Muhammad is a private revelation. Who knows? Here, the world is changed. Slaves leave slavery under great miracles. 600,000 people experience it. What better proof is it than this is the true religion? So the rabbi continues, they also saw Moses enter and emerge. They heard the 10 commandments, which represent the very essence of the law, divine allocution, the dictate followed by divine writing. And for these, he wrote 10 words on 2 tablets of precious stone handed to Moses. The people saw the divine writing as they heard the divine words. And everyone who was present at the time became convinced that the matter proceeded from God direct. And thus disappeared from souls of the believer the doubt of the philosopher and the materialist. And it was human experience, as the Jews experienced it, erased the problem of doubt. We've seen, we felt it. And that is what he says, the basis of Judaism. For me, it's sufficient that God chose them as people from all nations of the world, allowed his influence to rest on them. And use the word ha'inyan ha'elohi, that's the Hebrew word, divine influence or divine element. Because the Jewish people carry with them a special prophetic ability as a people. One individual or another maybe is not so great, but as a collective, they've got it. And that they nearly approach being addressed by him, right? That the people almost spoke with God. They couldn't take it, so let Moses do the speaking, but they heard. And it even descended on their women, right? The women are prophetesses, right? Among whom were prophetesses. Up till that time, in the time of Adam, only isolated individuals have been inspired to them. Remember, we have Adam, we have Ever, we have Shem, also going back in Jewish Midrash, who understand God and teach God, but it's only a few individuals. Abraham is an individual. It's one son, 12 sons, it's not a big deal. It is this massive vision of an entire people that gives us our justification, right? And that is why Judaism, we have to understand, and what HaLevi has done is he's encapsulated for us, that we understand that Judaism is the religion of a collective people. And so therefore, we do not need to push onto the world our own religion. He says, the Jews act in the world like the heart acts in the body. Our function is to produce spiritual enrichment. Everyone else can benefit from it. So our job is not to conquer. Our job is not to be the conquerors. Our job is to focus and meditate on ourselves and on our purpose as Jews. That's basically what he's going to get to. We don't have to prove to the world. We don't have to prove why. And it is then finally, as it wraps up, that the king is influenced, that only people who as a collective have experienced this can truth be found, right? Very different approach from that of Maimonides, who wants to go from rational principles and drive the proof. So that is HaLevi for us, Judah HaLevi for us. All right, a little bit of music, poetry, and the beautiful dialogue of what it means then to be a Jewish thinker and a Jewish believer. Okay, so I'm gonna go stop share. Thank you, King of the Khazaris, Jeff Buck, for this. Okay, and to wish all of you Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Okay, and everything good. Next week we'll have a selection from the Disputation at Barcelona. Very dramatic
Rabbi,
case. Yeah.
one question maybe for another time. The Crusades happens about that time, at the time of HaLevi.
Right, right.
And what was the relations between the Jewish and the Christians, because a large part of the Jewish population was in Spain.
Yeah, so Spain is, that's what I was looking at. Spain is, the Christians are beginning to reconquer large parts of Spain. So HaLevi actually begins his life in Toledo. It's under the Christians. They've already taken back, this is 1100 something. They've begun the Reconquista. And then he escapes to Cordova for a variety of reasons, but in Cordova, the Muslims make his life miserable because that, you can see the Muslim religion is no longer quite as enlightened and open. That's why Maimonides has to run away a few decades later, again, because of Muslim extremism. The land of Israel he's talking about is under the Christians. The Crusaders have held on to it. They held on to Jerusalem for about 2 centuries. The crusade was successful to a certain extent. They held on. It was not the Muslims who finally defeated the Christians. We know it was the Mongols, Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
They came in and basically weakened the Muslim kingdoms of that period, and also pushed out the Crusaders. At that time, from then on, I don't think the Muslim world really recovered as well. The bloom was off the rose after that in the Muslim world, and the center of new thought is shifting to Europe out of that. The Crusades, as much as we as Jews don't like the Crusades because we get the axe end of the Crusades, they opened up Europe to new thought and gave a spur to the creation of actual kingdoms and countries in Europe, and with that, commerce, trade, the reopening of thought with the Renaissance, there's all consequences of the Crusades. And so they're going up as the Muslim world is beginning to go down. The Ottomans bring back energy into it, but it's administrative and political energy in creating Ottoman Empire, but not the same creativity and intellect. In fact, then they go backwards with the printing press and refuse to allow Western and to allow modern thought to come into the Muslim world. And we see the consequences today with that. Closing down. Okay. All else considered, wish you all Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom, everybody.